Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on productivity, tons of your sources, articles, research, even personal notes, all about one thing really, how to squeeze the most out of your day.
And it's not just about working harder. It's about smarter. We're talking time blocking, the Pomodoro technique, that 2-minute rule, all these little hacks that can make a big difference.
Okay, let's break it down. We keep seeing structure your day everywhere in this stuff. What's the main takeaway?
I think it's recognizing our brains aren't meant to multitask constantly. These techniques are all about creating those focus blocks of time, minimizing distractions, and tapping into those times when we're really in the zone.
So giving your brain the right environment to do its thing instead of just bombarding it with demands all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that keeps coming up is that structure has to be personal. What works for a night owl might be terrible for an early bird.
Makes sense. Now, a lot of the sources are big on starting the night before. Why is that pre-planning so important?
It's like setting the stage for success. Instead of waking up to chaos and decision fatigue, you've already got a plan for your day. A lot of sources specifically mention the 3 MIT rule, your 3 most important tasks.
Ah, so not just a to-do list, it's like a prioritized attack plan for what really matters.
Right, precisely. And this connects to energy management, which also came up a lot. It's realizing our energy goes up and down throughout the day.
So instead of treating the whole day as one big block, we should be strategic about when we do certain tasks.
Yes. One source actually suggested tracking your energy levels for a week. Note when you feel most focused and when you tend to slump. Then you can schedule your MITs during those peak times, saving easier stuff for the dips.
That's so smart. I always try to just power through everything at once. No wonder I hit a wall in the afternoon. Now, time blocking, it seems to be a big favorite in these sources.
It's like the foundation of that structured day, basically dividing your day into chunks dedicated to specific tasks or types of work.
And the key is to stick to those blocks no matter what comes up.
As much as you can, yeah. The goal is to minimize task switching, which research shows actually makes you less efficient and more prone to errors. One source said it's like constantly restarting your computer. It takes time to boot back up each time.
So if I'm in my email block, I ignore the urge to jump into that presentation, even if I get a sudden burst of inspiration.
Exactly. Jot down the inspiration, but get back to those emails. It's about respecting the boundaries you've set for yourself.
Now, a lot of sources pair time blocking with the Pomodoro technique. What's the big deal about those 25-minute sprints?
It's a way to build in regular breaks, which are so important for focus and preventing burnout. That 25 minutes is long enough to get into deep work, but not so long that you burn out.
And I remember reading those short 5-minute breaks are actually more restorative than they seem, right?
Absolutely. It gives your brain a chance to reset. One source even mentioned a study where workers who took short, frequent breaks got more done overall than those who just tried to power through without pausing.
This is all making so much sense. It's like finally having a framework for how my brain actually works instead of fighting against it. But even with the best structure, distractions can be a real problem.
Especially these days with how connected we are, a lot of the sources talk about managing those distractions, especially digital ones.
So no more checking social media every few minutes. That's going to be tough.
It might be hard at first, but the benefits are huge. Several sources recommend things like turning off notifications you don't need, keeping your phone out of sight, even using website blockers if you have to.
And there was that idea of only checking email a few times a day instead of being glued to our inboxes all the time, right?
That one was interesting. It went against that always be available idea, but they argued it actually helps you do deeper, more focused work when you are dealing with email.
I actually tried that last week, and it was amazing how much calmer I felt. But what about those little tasks that keep popping up? The 2-minute rule seems to address that.
Right. The idea is if a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it right away. Prevents those little things from piling up and becoming overwhelming.
So file that document, send that quick reply. Don't let it clutter your mental space.
Yeah, exactly. It's about maintaining that sense of control and flow throughout your day. So we were talking about environment, right? Physical and digital to really get that productivity boost.
And I think that's a perfect segue to something else that came up a lot in these sources. Mindset. It's not just the external stuff, it's our internal state too.
Yeah, the emphasis on self-awareness is fascinating. One source even suggested a thought journal to track not just your tasks, but your energy levels, moods, and even those thought patterns that might be holding you back.
So like identifying those mental blocks, negative self-talk, perfectionism, the things that can sabotage us.
Exactly. A lot of sources talked about challenging those thoughts, replacing them with more positive affirmations.
I've tried affirmations. They always feel a little corny. Do they actually work?
It might sound simple, but more and more research is showing that our thoughts do influence our actions. There was this one study where athletes who did positive self-talk actually performed better and had less anxiety than those who focused on their weaknesses.
So instead of dwelling on mistakes or fearing future failures, we should focus on strengths and visualize success.
Right, exactly. Another source even said to make a list of your accomplishments and skills and look at it whenever you're feeling down on yourself. It's a good reminder of what you're capable of.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. But even with a positive mindset, sometimes motivation is still a struggle. Any techniques for boosting that drive to get things done?
Rewards came up a lot. It's about giving yourself something to look forward to, whether it's a small treat after a tough task or a bigger one for a long-term goal.
So like training your brain to connect productivity with positive feelings.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything big. One source even suggested just listening to your favorite music or taking a short walk in nature as a reward for finishing a Pomodoro cycle.
Love that. It's about those little moments of joy throughout the day. But what about when you're just overwhelmed? Like the to-do list is a mile long and you don't even know where to start.
One source had this great strategy: eat the frog first. It's about tackling your toughest task right away in the morning when your energy and willpower are at their peak.
That's a pretty vivid image. But I get it. Getting that big thing out of the way early can make you feel like you've already accomplished something and sets the tone for the rest of the day.
Right. And it prevents that feeling of dread and procrastination that can build up when you keep putting it off.
This is all so helpful. It feels like a whole new way of thinking about my day. But let's be real. Even with the best plans, life happens. How do we stay productive when those unexpected challenges come up?
Flexibility is key. One source talked about building buffer time into your schedule for interruptions or delays.
So, instead of scheduling every single minute, leave some wiggle room for the inevitable fire drills.
Yeah, exactly. Another source suggested having a plan B for those days when things go off the rails. Maybe it's a list of easier tasks you can do when your energy is low or you can't focus.
Smart. It's about being ready for anything and having a backup so you don't feel totally derailed.
Another thing that kept coming up was learning to say no, setting boundaries and protecting your time and energy for what really matters.
Ugh, that's a tough one for me. I hate saying no, especially at work. But I get how constantly taking on more can lead to burnout, and in the end, you're less productive.
One source recommended practicing those assertive communication techniques like I statements. Focus on why you're declining, not making excuses or apologizing.
So instead of I'm too busy, it's I'm focusing on this high priority project right now, but I'm happy to look at this later.
Exactly. Be clear, direct, and respectful of your own time and theirs.
This is all so helpful. I'm feeling more in control of my time and to-do list already. But, we've been talking a lot about individual stuff, but what about the bigger picture? Does our whole lifestyle play a role in productivity?
It definitely does. A lot of sources said it's about a holistic approach, looking at work habits, sleep, food, exercise, all of it.
So it's not just squeezing more work into the day, it's creating a lifestyle that supports those goals long term.
Yeah, one source compared it to training for a marathon. You wouldn't expect to be at your best if you were sleep deprived, eating junk, and neglecting your physical health.
Right, that's a good analogy. Makes sense that taking care of ourselves physically and mentally would affect our ability to focus and be productive.
One source even suggested things like mindfulness practices, meditation, yoga to reduce stress, improve focus, and just enhance well-being overall.
I've heard about that, but always thought meditation was for, hippies and yogis. Can it really help with productivity?
More and more research is showing that even a few minutes a day can have a real impact on your brain, how you handle emotions, your overall well-being. One study found that employees who did a mindfulness program reported less stress, better focus, and even more job satisfaction.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. But what about us night owls? All this talk about morning routines and getting up early makes me feel behind before I even start.
That's a great point. Not everyone works on the same schedule. One source was really big on honoring your natural chronotype, whether you're a morning person, a night owl, or somewhere in between.
So if I'm more productive in the evening, I shouldn't force myself to wake up at 5 a.m. just because some guru said so.
Exactly. Work with your natural rhythms, not against them. If you're a night owl, schedule your hardest tasks for the evening when you're at your peak.
This is so freeing. Like I can actually work with my own energy patterns, not try to fit into someone else's mold.
And that connects to a bigger thing that came up a lot: self-compassion. Realizing there's no one right way to be productive. It's about finding what works for you and being kind to yourself along the way.
This is all so incredibly helpful. I'm feeling a lot more empowered to create a productive lifestyle that actually works for me. But I think it's time for another break. We've covered so much, and there's still more to explore. All right, we're back for the final part of our productivity deep dive. We've covered a ton, from structuring your day to mindset, even self-care.
And there's always more, right? One thing that struck me going through all this is how productivity is often seen as this solo thing, but there's a social side to it too, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. Most of the tips are about personal habits and stuff, but we don't work in a bubble. How we interact with others can really make or break our productivity.
Exactly. And several sources were big on communication, both setting clear expectations and asking for help when you need it.
So it's not just about me managing my own time, it's also how my actions affect others and how theirs affect me.
Right. One source really emphasized clear, concise communication, especially when you're delegating tasks or working on a project together.
Making sure everyone's on the same page, avoiding confusion and wasted effort.
Yeah. And they talked about the importance of feedback too. Giving and receiving constructive criticism can really help us get better.
I see how that ties into the growth mindset we talked about. Being open to learning and improving, even when it comes to how we work.
Definitely. And remember, feedback doesn't have to just come from bosses or coworkers. Talking to friends, family, or mentors can give you great insights into your strengths and weaknesses.
It's about having a support system, people who can offer different perspectives and help us see things we might miss.
Another interesting point was how our social environment affects productivity.
So not just who we directly work with, but the whole culture and atmosphere of our workplace.
Exactly. Research shows that workplaces that encourage collaboration, open communication, and that sense of belonging tend to have more productive, happier employees.
Makes sense. If you feel supported and valued, you're going to be more motivated and engaged in your work.
Right. And on the other hand, a toxic or super competitive work environment can really drain you and mess with your productivity. One source even said it might be worth looking for a new job if your current one is constantly stressing you out and holding you back.
Wow, that's a big step. But I get it. The work environment really does play a huge role in how productive we are.
And it goes back to that idea of taking charge of your own productivity journey. We're not just stuck with what we're given, we can make choices to support our goals and well-being.
That's a good point. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners now that they've heard all this?
Well, first, remember, productivity isn't a finish line, it's a process. No magic formula works for everyone, so try things out, adapt, and find what works best for you.
And don't forget that self-compassion. It's okay to mess up, have bad days, and change your approach if you need to.
Exactly, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Whether it's colleagues, friends, family, or even a coach, having that support system can make a world of difference.
And lastly, remember, productivity isn't just about checking off more boxes. It's about creating a more fulfilling life.
It's using your time and energy well, doing things that align with what you believe in, and making room for the things that truly matter.
One final thought for everyone out there. What if, instead of seeing time as this thing to be managed or beaten, we saw it as a valuable resource to be treasured and used intentionally to create the